Nigerian-born superstar Israel Adesanya has been the king of the middleweight hill since he knocked out Bobby Knuckle in 2019. However, Israel has been criticized by fans several times for playing it safe in the octagon. Recently, the 33-year-old confirmed his fight with former Olympic wrestler Yoel Romero had been a low point of his career. Keep watching to find out more. First off, why were fans disappointed? Many factors combined to produce the most boring performance Izzy has put on inside the octagon. The fight had extraordinarily high expectations. Yoel is a Cuban freak of nature, an enigma that had become the scariest gatekeeper the UFC had ever seen. His crazy knockout wins over former champions like Luke Rockhold and Chris Weidman skyrocketed him to the status of mythical title challenger, a man capable of beating anyone on his night. In similar colors of invincibility, the champion's two most recent fights included a fight with the year contender against Gastelum and a one-sided victory over Robert Whittaker. When Izzy called out the division's boogeyman for his first defense, the MMA world was looking for a war. However, what presented itself on UFC 248 has been called the worst title fight ever, with less than 100 strikes landed by the two fighters across 5 rounds. Both fighters looked to the counter, waiting for their opponent to initiate the action. They kept waiting for 5 rounds. Yoel even stood as still as a statue for several seconds, multiple times in the fight, just to invite Izzy in. After Yoel caught Izzy with a clean overhand right in the first round, the champ was content to light up the Cuban's legs from a distance and edged out a split decision victory. Additionally, how did Israel feel about his performance? Stars at the caliber of Adesanya are their own worst critics, and the New Zealander-based fighter has been very honest about the times when he felt he hadn't lived up to his potential. However, Izzy is also super aware of his ability and supremely confident in what he puts out for his fans. He pointed out that even though a lot of people booed him after the fight, those who saw Yoel's next fight saw that he does the same thing to everyone. His fighting style is to frustrate his opponent into rushing in, lulling them into a false sense of security with his slow and lethargic movement, and then exploding at them when they make a mistake or get too close. Izzy didn't let him do that, and Yoel never moved forward because he knew Israel is literally one of the most technically profound kickboxers the world had ever seen. When you think about it, those criticizing Adesanya were doing so because he didn't throw caution to the wind and charge at Yoel. As champion, Israel's job is to hit up his opponent more than he gets hit and cause his damage. This he did. He outstruck Romero 48-40 and kicked Yoel's leg to a chewed up mess. Still, the fans went from loving him for the most recent performances to calling him a fake overnight, and this can be disturbing for anyone. However, Izzy said that age and experience have taught him to drown all the noise out, stay calm, and desire to be as great as he can in the sport. Next is a bad, but successful, performance really worth losing? It came as a shock to a lot of people when Israel recently admitted to the Romero fight being the low moment in his career. The Nigerian lost his fight to light heavyweight champion Jan Blachowicz at UFC 267 and is scheduled to face the man who knocked him out cold as Alex Pereira in UFC 281. Lots of people may have been shocked, but few can really understand the mindset of these gladiators fighting at the highest level in the world. Israel said he's definitely disappointed about not realizing champ status, but that misstep in his legacy came from his desire to take risks and be great. He was aware that GOAT status is difficult to achieve while staying in the same weight class. Took his shot and sadly missed, not to mention how good Jan Blachowicz really is. The loss didn't hurt Israel's pride, and many of his fans were fine with the result. With Yoel, even though Izzy won the fight, fans blamed him for not trying or running away from the challenger. That's what hurt Izzy's pride. The kickboxing world champion faces a similar yet more daunting task when he fights fellow kickbox specialist Alex Pereira. Alex has beaten Izzy not once, but twice in their former sport. Once on points, but the second fight ended with Izzy's only knockout loss in his professional career. Fans once more question Izzy's ability to coast through a decision, but the champ is confident. Finally, technical decision victories versus finishes. The Romero fight was not the last time Israel heard the chants of snooze fest and runner. The fact of the matter is, we all love it when a fighter is knocked out cold via perfect head kick or choked unconscious on the mat, but there may be a problem with that. It's just not possible every time. The athletes we see in the UFC are literally some of the best, most dangerous, and most technical fighters on the planet. It is gold tier of fighting. When your opponent is of such a high caliber, it's not always possible to separate them from consciousness. Closely matched fighters, which is the correct way to make the matchups, often lack the difference in ability that leads to knockout sequences or submissions. Secondly, it may be fighting, but it's also a sport. The fighters are athletes and human beings looking to make a living for themselves and retire with all their mental faculties. Putting oneself at risk to get a flashy knockout often ends in the aggressor getting countered, and repeated trauma leads to CTE and brain damage. We can enjoy knockouts when they happen, but rooting for someone to get life-altering damage can be a little insensitive towards those who put their lives on the line. Lastly, the game isn't knockout or get knocked out. The game is hit and don't get hit. In the immortal words of Nate Diaz, pop, pop, hit 'em when good shots, don't get hit, go home with a pocket full of cash. It's just not a good game plan to get into firefights with the world's best, and caution should be exercised. In other news, Paddy the Baddie is back. Paddy the Baddie Pimblett has taken the UFC by storm since his debut in 2021. The UK-based fighter is famous for his outrageous moments on the mic and his skills inside the cage, but what has been making the headlines most recently is his weight. Paddy's known for ballooning up to cross 210 pounds between fight camps and then cutting back down to 155 for fight night. A lot of fighters walk around several pounds above their weight class, but Paddy goes on a junk food binge, counting over 10,000 calories on an Instagram junk food binge. It's been correctly pointed out by many how bad such weight fluctuation can be for someone's long-term health, not to mention the lack of discipline it points towards a professional fighter at the highest level. However, Paddy is happy. Secondly, Makhachev's own prediction for UFC 280. The Dagestani steamroller is looking to turn his 10-fight win streak into a title run at UFC 280 by defeating de facto champion Charles Oliveira. Islam's relationship with Khabib was apparently in the way when he provided an in-depth analysis of how he believed he would beat the Brazilian. Even the way the two Sambo champions describe their fight is similar. Islam believes he'll get the job done within 3 rounds. First round, he wants to warm up with Charles and take some wind out of his sails. In the second round, Islam wants to drag the Phenom into deep water and drown him in a Khabib-esque style of Sambo wrestling that broke the division's best, and then finish the fighter in the third. If you're new to the sport, this might seem like overconfidence. However, if we can take a minute to look at the first-minute submission of Hangman Dan Hooker or his wrestling masterclass with Tsaru Kyon, the claims make a bit more sense. Whatever happens, Oliveira v. Makhachev is the best matchup of this year. It's gonna be a wild night. Lastly, the late queen was booed at UFC 279. MMA crowds are notoriously honest and rowdy with their feelings, and this was put on full display at UFC 279 when the Queen's picture was put up on screen. The crowd booed and jeered at the late monarch's picture until management was forced to take it down, at which point the crowd cheered. It's extremely difficult to pinpoint an exact reason for the crowd's animosity, even though the Queen has never said anything good or bad about the UFC or MMA in general. It's even more puzzling consider the event's progression was not altered by the funeral, unlike the UK where all major sporting events had been delayed. Maybe it's an American reaction to the death of a monarch whose predecessors colonized them, much like the indifference expressed at the event in other parts of the world. Or maybe MMA just isn't a place where royalty and glamour are appreciated. 2 of the most hotly anticipated matchups at the UFC are on the horizon: Israel vs. Alex and Islam vs. Charles. Titles could change hands and legacies could be cemented before the year runs out, and we're all but holding our breath. That's all for today's video. Comment down below who you think will take home the gold at UFC 280 and 281. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more MMA content. We'll see you in the next one.